Hey guys, I'm Ava, and let's talk about Pokemon. Today I am back with a spreadsheet for an entire era of Pokemon. This time we will be talking about XY. This, I would say, is where we get to the beginning of the current modern era, and by that I'm really talking about prices for sealed products. Once you get to black and white, it gets a lot more expensive. Those cards are still modern, I would say, but the prices that you are paying for sealed products become much higher, and it is also much more difficult to find certain products, in particular ETBs. Plasma Storm ETB can be very, very difficult to find, but I would say for XY, I was able to find at least one listing for every single product on here, although some of them were not commonly listed, one example being XY base set. So keeping that in mind, all of these should be taken with a grain of salt because prices and sales for these products vary so much. Some of these prices are taken from TCGPlayer and some are taken from eBay, in particular recent sales, just because something is listed for a certain amount, especially when you're looking at $4,000 or $5,000 for an ETB, doesn't mean that's necessarily what it's going to sell for. I believe right now the lowest listing on eBay for an XY ETB is $5,000, but I don't think that is really what it's worth right now. So let's talk about this. This data is really, really interesting to me because the thing that immediately jumped out, aside from the obvious fact that older products are most likely going to appreciate more, especially because around 2014 not as many people were keeping products sealed, is that it really depends on the quantity of a product that's available. So, for example, let's look at a Primal Clash ETB. The ETB is going for $2,000, and the booster box is only going for $480. Keep in mind that the booster box has 4 times as many packs. The reason this is going for so much more is because there are so few of the ETB available, but so many people want it. And this goes for multiple other sets as well. You can see this for Roaring Skies, Ancient Origins, basically any set where the ETB is super green and the other ones are not, means that the kind of quantity there really played a factor, I would say. And we know that ETBs tend to do well, but the reason this is really, really outperforming is just that the quantity was so much lower. ETBs were not nearly as popular back in the day. You can see Flashfire didn't even actually have an ETB. I believe at this point they were printing an ETB for every other set, and then it looks like from Furious Fits onwards that they started printing one every set, which is something interesting to note because I had never really noticed that pattern before making this video, but I think that is very, very interesting. So what can we do with that information? That it really depends on the quantity. Obviously supply and demand are important factors, but I think a lot of times in the hobby we talk about the demand side more. So things like Evolving Skies have really high demand, but supply matters a lot as well. And what we can do with this information is really pay attention to reprints, because that is going to matter a lot. So a lot of times when we're talking about reprints, we're actually talking about booster boxes. Sometimes ETBs won't get reprinted much at all. A modern example would be Vivid Voltage. The ETB has not been printed nearly as much as the booster box, which is going for around $115 to $125 right now, whereas the ETB, I would say, is going from anywhere to $80 to $90 as of last time I checked. That is because the ETB is in much lower supply, so you can use that to help keep in mind your potential returns, and just keep an eye out for things that are being reprinted a lot. They might not appreciate as much, especially because so many more people are keeping things sealed, whereas things that have not been reprinted as much will likely do better. For example, the Vivid Voltage ETB, if that is not reprinted, it will likely continue to outperform a lot of other ETBs because so many people want to collect ETBs, but of course the supply for Vivid Voltage is much lower than things like Chilling Reign. So the next thing I want to talk about are the returns here. So we have some insane numbers here. The XY base set ETB having appreciated nearly 10,000% is actually crazy, but you can see that the annualized return is 76%. One of my patrons is actually kind enough to point out that I should include annualized rate of return, so I should actually relabel this annualized rate of return to make it more clear for everyone. I'll go through and fix that later. But annualized rate of return is accounting for the compound returns. So I included this because it helps make it more comparable to things like stocks and more traditional forms of investment. Obviously this is an alternative form investment if you want to think of it that way. the risk is definitely much higher, but you can see that this annualized rate of return is much higher. This is different from what I previously had because this is accounting for compounding returns. So for example, this is 76%, but that is compounded actually daily. So this is the function for that. But this is approximately equivalent of taking the base price, which is $40, and multiplying it times 1.76 because that is our 76% return, times, we're going to say about 8 because it has been 8 years. This isn't perfectly accurate because this is annual, which is less accurate. So this would actually work out to 4,000 if you did it on a daily basis, but just for the purposes of this illustration, we're just doing that. So that I think is going to be helpful for thinking about the actual return and comparing it to a traditional investment. The S&P 500 typically has a return, on average, people say around 7 to 10%. This does really depend, of course, on macroeconomic factors. In a recession, you're not going to see any sort of positive return, and I think that holds true for trading cards as well. It's interesting because none of these have been through any sort of recession. It would be interesting to look at products from pre-2008 and see how those compared, but of course those are going to be much more expensive and data is going to be much less readily available. So what we see here is that products typically are going to be ranging from about 15% to, on the very high end, 76% here. I would say when looking at this data, you might want to focus on products that have a lower ARR, so annualized rate of return, because these sets kind of, for the time they've been out, they haven't appreciated as much, and that does mean that there is more potential. You can see, though, that older sets, they don't start to see a lower rate of return, which is a good thing because that means that if you are buying, say, something like Roaring Skies for $375, that is very expensive, but when it is a few more years old, you will still most likely see some appreciation. This gets a little more muddy when you start comparing to fully ultra-modern sets because those have like really different circumstances because they are so much more commonly kept sealed. But for this, if you look at something like Steam Siege, for example, the booster box might actually be a decent buy. The contents are not very valuable, but that isn't really the point with these types of products. None of them have contents that would justify the prices. So I think that you could probably buy Steam Siege fairly safely. I would recommend most likely the booster box in this case because it has appreciated much less, though of course the ETB is more rare, and you could also go for packs because you can see they've hardly appreciated at all, but I usually don't like to invest in loose packs because it is so much work to keep track of, and when you're going to sell them, unless you're going to be selling them in lots, it's a lot of effort to ship that many products, and if you're going to sell them in lots, why not just go for the booster box? It makes your life a lot more simple. Other products I think I would recommend on here are the Roaring Skies booster box that has seen an average 18% annualized return. All of these products, keep in mind, aside from really the Steam Siege pack, have outperformed the S&P 500, though you would have to keep in mind that this is not representative of, say, like a 100-year period where the S&P 500 averages around like 8 to 10% because these products haven't gone through any sort of recession, which brings that average down. I think for the past 10 years, the S&P has definitely averaged more than 8 to 10% return, so do bear that in mind. But I think that the Roaring Skies booster box is a solid option. It does have a few desirable cards in it, so this is the set that really focused on Rayquaza, Mega Rayquaza, so there are some pretty solid Rayquaza cards in there that are worth $40 to $50. I would have to double check, and it of course depends on condition, it varies a lot. I'm also going to be including some links to some of the products I recommended, most likely in a pinned comment under this video. Some of them might be affiliate links yet, I'm not sure because I haven't gone and double checked what the prices are and what websites they're on. It does help me out if you buy through my link, and it doesn't cost you anything, but of course if you don't want to, no pressure. Primal Clash is another one that I would recommend. This has another few valuable cards as well, primarily Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre. I think those cards are fairly valuable. Not that it justifies the price of this box, but I think it is a fairly decent set. I don't think a lot of XY sets were particularly great. Flashfire is definitely the best. It had a lot of Charizard cards, but it is incredibly expensive. So I don't think I could recommend that to you guys in good faith because the prices of products like that vary so much, and it's a lot of money to put into one product for most people. That just isn't realistic. Another product I think is decent is Breakthrough. The break sets get a lot of shit because they have some really questionable cards in them, but Breakthrough is, I think, a fairly cool set. In particular, it has a couple of very, very cool secret rare Mewtwo cards. I had some of them and I don't know why I traded them away. I wish I still had them. They were so cool. Same goes for Breakpoint. There's a very, very cool shiny Gyarados EX card in there that I think looks very, very awesome. They look kind of like the alternate arts of our modern era, which I think make them kind of underrated for how much they currently cost. So I think Breakpoint could also be a decent investment. They both have 24% return, and it's interesting because they both came out like fairly close together, right? But their ARR is both 24%, which kind of shows you the power of that compounding return, because they only came out about 5 months apart, but the difference between them is over $50, which is quite cool because you can expect some pretty decent gains once you have passed like 5 years. It's pretty impressive. So another thing I really want to talk about actually is these special sets. In particular, not Generations. Generations is a very, very cool set, but it has appreciated a lot. I don't think it's necessarily undervalued by any means. It is a very cool set. I did purchase an ETB because I wanted it for my collection, though I don't know if it's the best investment in terms of your potential ROI. Something I think is very, very cool is Double Crisis. So Double Crisis was a special set, but it was never printed in an ETB. So I've noted here that it was blister only. You could only buy this product in a 4-pack blister, which is very, very cool. It has some very cool Kyogre and Groudon cards in it that you've probably seen and just didn't realize were from this. This is a really underrated set that nobody really talks about. It has seen some decent returns. You can actually find it cheaper than this. But this is about the average listing on eBay. I think you could probably get this for closer to $180 if I'm being honest. I think this product is very cool. I actually just recently picked up a blister myself when I was researching this video because I had never really thought about Double Crisis before, but it's a very cool product, and I would not normally recommend to invest in blisters because they are not normally the most desirable products from any given set. However, Double Crisis is the exception to this because the blister is the only product that exists, which means it is the most desirable product, and I think that is pretty unique because we have not really seen that. I think this is one of the first really modern era special sets. Back before XY, they were not releasing a lot of special sets regularly. This, I think, is when they started to release them, you know, once every year, or now they're doing it multiple times a year, which I think is very, very cool. So for that reason, I would really recommend Double Crisis. The packs actually also look very, very cool, so I think it is something that would be worthy for you to display, and it is a very cool product as well. So looking at our returns, we have talked a lot about how ETBs tend to outperform. By the way, if you guys like this video, please subscribe to my channel. These take a while to make. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. But these ETBs, you can see they tend to outperform. This has held true, but this is not necessarily going to hold going forward. A lot of times collectible prices are dependent on really how much people want them after they came out. And it's things that people weren't thinking about, oh, should I keep this sealed because people might want this? People are doing that now, so that really changes the playing field here. So many more people are keeping ETBs sealed because it's so commonly said that ETBs have the best return. And I think for that reason, you want to be cautious. I would not recommend buying any of these ETBs. If you're looking to invest, if you're looking to buy them for your collection, I say go for it because who am I to judge? I spend so much money on stupid shit for this hobby. But but I did recently just buy a Breakpoint ETB for myself as well because I think it is a very cool product, and I was able to get it for $145, which is decently below market rate right now, so I was very happy to pick that up for my collection, and I think that is a solid product to pick up as well. It has seen a 29% return on investment, so out of all of these ETBs, I think that Breakpoint is going to be your best bet because it has had the lowest ROI, and it is closest in price to its booster box counterpart. You can see that it is 29% versus 24%, which is only a 5% difference. Of course, this is ARR, so it kind of amounts to being a lot more over time. I think Breakpoint is a pretty cool set. The Mega Gyarados on it doesn't look the coolest, but overall, if you are looking to collect as many ETBs as possible, this is a very solid option. If you want to have something a bit older in your collection, this product is now 6 years old, which is pretty crazy to think about. So I think that is a very solid option for you guys if you are looking to collect something like that. So some of the products that I would recommend most to you guys, I have noted on here. In particular, the Double Crisis Blister. You could also go for the loose packs for this. I don't think that's as much to worry about compared to 4 packs. It's worth 4 times more, which makes your life a little easier, and there typically is a premium for having things sealed. However, I've noticed that the lowest prices I've seen on eBay were $55 for these, and a lot of them were going for $65 or more. So you actually kind of would end up making more if you sold these individually. However, that's very, very risky, and I would not recommend opening up a sealed product just to do that. But other products that I would recommend are the Primal Clash booster boxes or Primal Clash packs if you don't mind managing all of that. And also, if you have a smaller budget, that would work very well for you. Roaring Skies booster box as well. Steam Siege booster box is a solid option if you are a budget collector, or if you just are working on completing a booster box collection and you want to start small but you want something older. This is, again, for a similar reason to Breakpoint, a good option, which brings me to my next point, which is Breakpoint, particularly the ETB, I think is a very solid option. You could also buy the packs for this as well. They've only appreciated 12%. Same goes for Fates Collide, but these sets don't necessarily have the coolest cards in them, so do with that what you will. And finally, let's look at our returns. So for our booster packs, we average 535%. This is total returns, by the way. ETB is 3,700%. Again, this one is really, really heavily weighted by the XY base set. Let's say this was 2,000 and see what happens. It goes down to 3,000, and 2,000 is still a lot of money to pay for one product. Boxes are 627%, special ETBs, and in this I'm including the blister because that is a special product, and the closest equivalent that we have for that set are 1,078%, which brings us to an average of exactly 1,250, which is very, very satisfying. So when you compare this to our Sword and Shield video, you can see that the returns start to become so much greater over time, which is why, again, I always recommend holding for at least 5 years. All of these products are at least 5 years old, so this is a great illustrator of the potential gains you could see. But again, keep in mind that you might not see crazy gains. Things like Steam Siege have not appreciated that much. Things like Fates Collide have not appreciated that much. Breakpoint, Breakthrough, but, you know, reliably, high-quality sets tend to do pretty well. Flashfire is the best set in the X and Y era, and also base sets tend to do pretty well. As I've said in all my videos, I think this kind of proves my point that base sets tend to do very, very well. Of course, this is just one example, and you can't rely on that as being perfectly factual and reliable going forward into perpetuity, but I think for this base set is a good example that base sets tend to do well. They're memorable. Also, when we're looking at selling our products, you can see here that we will have some pretty crazy returns on our investment, even after fees, but you can see that they do tend to eat up a lot. So if you were selling a XY base set ETB, you lucky soul, you have $3,400 after, so roughly your fees were going to be about $500, which is a lot, but you're making so much more, so it's worth it. The only things you would actually lose out on in this equation are Fates Collide packs and Steam Siege packs. So again, this is why I don't recommend packs as much, because you really have to sell them a lot to get any sort of decent profit. Another thing I would recommend if you are going to do packs is to just sell them as a lot, because then you don't have to pay this shipping cost nearly as many times, and that is really what's eating away at these profits the most. If you only had to pay that once for, say, 5 packs, that would really save you like $12 or a little bit more than that, I think $13 actually, which is a very, very good option for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy it, please subscribe, give this video a like, and comment what you'd like to see next, and consider supporting my Patreon. This video is brought to you by all of my wonderful patrons, in particularly the squandering of my life. If you guys had joined my Patreon, you would have had early access to this spreadsheet where you would have been able to see the initial draft and give an input, which I think is very cool because it did actually lead to a fairly large change in this spreadsheet and the way I presented it to you guys. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.